We are talking with Dr. Roger Marshall, who is a current sitting congressman from the great state of Kansas, and he is running for the United States Senate. And the election is obviously coming up very soon. We're very grateful to have him speak about what is going on the campaign trail, where his race currently stands, and where he is thinking on different issues. So, Dr. Marshall, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Yeah, Gabrielle, it's great to be with you. Obviously, I'm on the trail here, so hope your viewers will forgive me that it's not a perfect view, but this is my life right now. A Saturday morning, just left a gun show in Kansas City and on our way to Lawrence, and we'll be in Topeka and back in Kansas City for rallies today.
That's great to hear. Why don't you first start off with your background? I think my listeners and watchers would be very curious to know about your background and why you got involved in politics.
Well, you know, I tell folks I'm a fifth-generation farm kid, and I was born and raised outside of Wichita, about 30, 60 miles away on family farms. My dad became the chief of police there eventually for 25 years. I became a first-generation college student, and my American dream was to become a doctor. My wife and I got married 2 weeks before medical school 30-some years ago. And after residency and Army Reserve, we moved to a little city called Great Bend. It's on the Great Bend of the Arkansas River. We delivered over 5,000 babies, raised 4 of our own. I've lived this great American dream. We've got 2 grandsons now, 1 on the way. And I want to make sure that we lead this country better than we found it. I want to make sure that our kids have the same shot at the American dream that I've had.
It's very good to hear. Why don't we first talk about guns and the outdoors? I was informed, and I did a little research into the fact that you are a very avid outdoorsman. You consider yourself a sportsman, and actually your opponent, Barbara Bollier, actually recently claimed that she supports Australian-style gun confiscation. Could you speak to all those points?
Wow, first of all, it's scary. I mean, she's just not liberal. She's extreme. She's extreme on this issue. She has an F- voting rating with the NRA. Ours is A+. And we were a lifetime member of the NRA before I thought about running for Congress, right? So truly have always been an avid hunter. At least once or twice a week, we really hunt. I have labs and Vizslas. I just live in the hunting mecca of the world between 2 wildlife refuges. We have land beside both of those refuges, as well as several thousand other 100 acres of hunting available as well. Growing up, my typical Saturday afternoon, my dad was the police officer. We go out to the gun range once a month, and he would qualify. And we would, of course, learn to shoot weapons as well. And then we'd go run the police boat at the lake, and then we'd go hunting and fishing. If my dad wasn't get called back for a fire, maybe if there was a grass fire, my dad would let us ride on the Jeeps to help fight the grass fire. So just grew up in the outdoors. And just never had a second thought about the Second Amendment. I can't believe that there is truly an assault on it now. We just left this gun show in Kansas City, and one of the legislation that we've introduced is making it easier to buy a short-barreled rifle. And I'm sure you know this, but your listeners, for women especially, it's maybe the best self-defense weapon out there is a short-barreled rifle. It's not loud. It's not much of a recoil to it. You can buy a suppressor with it as well. And it takes over a year, maybe 2 years to get approval to buy one of those weapons. So we've introduced legislation that would take away some of that hassle factor. And I just think more than ever that folks are concerned about their security and not just their border security, but their security at home. When we see Kenosha, Wisconsin, a police department get burned to the ground in little Kenosha, Wisconsin, it has a lot of us concerned.
Yeah, and could you speak more to conservation? I think we were talking a little bit beforehand before proceeding into this interview that Republicans have often neglected on these issues, and taking a stand on conservation, it should be understood that doesn't mean you're replicating a lot of what radical environmentalists or leftist environmentalists say. But have you seen kind of this transition to kind of an offensive approach by Republicans and conservatives in Congress, taking a more proactive stance, communicating their views on conservation? And we've seen it in legislation as well. So could you speak to some recent legislation and why it's kind of encouraging to see Republicans champion these issues
Right.
more so?
You know, so absolutely. Let me just talk first about my heart. I was taught as a young Boy Scout to leave it better than we found it. And I'm so proud of what America's done, that our carbon footprint is at a 25-year low, that we're 10% lower than we were a decade ago, thanks to conservation and innovation. Georgia, the original conservationist, we were doing this before anybody thought it was cool, right? We did it because it's the right thing. The air, the water of Kansas is cleaner today than when I was growing up for a lot of reasons. You know, my grandfathers built terraces in the fields that helped with soil conservation. And now I walk into Congress and the government's trying to regulate the water puddles running off of it. It was called Waters of the U.S.
Yes.
And I'm proud to work with President Trump's team and dial that back a little bit. So Republicans do need to embrace this. And I think that most of us are conservationists, but we don't wear it on our shirt sleeves. We wear it in our hearts. We wear it on our actions. So I want to talk about the Farm Bill for a second. Everybody knows that the Farm Bill, 80% of the dollars goes towards food stamps, and the other large chunks towards crop insurance. But there's big conservation sections of the Farm Bill, and whether it's CRP or the EQIP programs, they're all great conservation pieces. One of the things that we also accomplished was getting more land, more funding for the walk-in hunting, which is really popular in Kansas. And I hope some of your listeners are aware of what walk-in hunting is. I'm not sure if other states have that or not, but
Do you elaborate on it?
Yeah, but so farmers rent out that land, but they deserve something for it rather than just letting people come in and use the land. And frankly, some folks are a little hard on the land and they don't leave it better than they found it. So those would be a couple examples. And mostly, when we think about how this country's improved conservation-wise, it's not because of a carbon tax or the federal government. It's because of American innovation. So I've spent a lot of my time working with the best people in the world that know the most about this topic. And typically it's entrepreneurs. So one of the things I'm really focused on right now is carbon capture and what we can plant in Kansas in the off season. So we plant milo and corn in the spring. We harvest it. So those fields are bare right now. So we're going back with cover crops that will recapture the carbon. Of course, we've been doing no-till farming for 2 decades. We're using a fraction of the water we once used. We're using a fraction of the fertilizers because of precision farming. And I'm sorry, I get really excited about this. I'll stop there, Gabrielle, and let you ask another question. But I could talk for hours about the conservation practices that farming and ranching are doing right now.
Yeah, I've kind of observed in just the years I've been covering this issue that we see a lot of different conservation stakeholders at the table. And I think people don't give the president credit for this, but he has allowed more different stakeholders, private landowners, farmers, ranchers, and others who felt left behind in the past administration, who felt pigeonholed and were legally silenced in many cases and kind of shut out from the conversation. I think people across the political spectrum have seen that different stakeholders are more empowered. They're not being targeted so much, and they want to cooperate with state and federal government more so for conservation projects, just because they're not being treated as hostile actors. Is that kind of something you've observed as well? I think all conservationists feel like they have a little bit better of a voice right now.
Exactly, and what I'm trying to do is bring the hunting and fishing group in with more vocal conservationists. But the great thing about hunting and fishing, we put our money where our mouth is. You know, every time we buy a box of shotgun shells, we're using money towards conservation. I sat on the Wildlife and Parks Commission in Kansas, I think for 4 or 5 years. And of course, we know President Obama was a great salesperson for ammunition. So we had record amounts of dollars coming in. We built, for instance, places where you could go shoot your weapons and firing ranges and did all sorts of creative things. Lots of women's in that industry now as well. But we see lots of things happening in this area, lots of excitement. And again, I want to go back to my farmers and ranchers are just doing an incredible job, and want to make sure that your listeners understand that farmers and ranchers don't have a lot of cash. They don't have money in the stock market. The inheritance they're leaving their children is that land. and they want to make sure that future generations can run cattle and plant corn and wheat on that same land as well. So we're really stepping up our game all across the country when it comes to agriculture.
Great to hear. If you were to be elected to the Senate with respect to these issues, and then we'll dip a little bit more into politics and more so about how you contrast your opponent, what committees would you like to be on, and what conservation and gun issues would you advance? Would you advance like a Hearing Protection Act as well? That's something when Republicans had previously control of both chambers when Trump got in. A lot of people were hoping that type of legislation would pass, concealed carry reciprocity. So kind of talk about what you would advance on this front before we move on to some of the other aspects of your campaign.
Well, sure. Well, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. And those are all issues that we've worked very hard on already, that we were co-sponsors of those types of legislation. And I just want to remind your listeners, though, it's going to take 60 votes on the Senate to pass something like that. So it's got to, even though we had control of the Senate, we didn't have 60 votes. So we're going to need your listeners to engage, to reach out to some Democrat senators and get them on board with it as well. And flipping the House will be quite a challenge right now. It's feasible, but it's not going to happen as long as Nancy Pelosi has a gavel in her hand. But without any doubt, the Second Amendment is under assault, and we're going to keep standing up for that. And again, what we need your listeners to start communicating is the Second Amendment is what protects the First Amendment. And now those same people that want to take our guns away from us want to take away our freedoms of speech and our freedoms of religion. And the Second Amendment is the banner, it's the flagship, it's what protects the rest of the Constitution. So we need your folks in growing our team members, I'm going to say. So those folks that feel like their conservative thought is being censored right now, which it is, we need you to stand up for the Second Amendment as well.
Okay, thanks. Let's move a little bit more to politics, and this will more so cover my town hall column, what I'd like you to speak on that. So kind of contrast yourself with your opponent. I read, and it kind of surprises me, but not surprises me. I've read a little bit into kind of Kansas political makeup, how a lot of moderate Republicans, I don't know if they were Republicans to begin with, have switched over to the Democrat side, and your opponent is an example of that. Could you speak to that, and could you kind of contrast your plan with hers and what she wants to do? I understand she's pretty extreme. She would kind of be a rubber stamp for Chuck Schumer, but could you elaborate more specifically on what policy she's championing that would work against the interests of Kansans?
Right. So she is extreme on issues. She has a very, very liberal voting record. She's voted over 90% of the time with Democrats. She's been in the State House and Senate for 10 years. But she has an F- rating with the NRA and the Kansans for life. So she's voted against every type of, let me put it this way, she's voted in favor of every legislation she's had a chance to that would put regulations on guns. And she's vocally in videotapes saying that she would support gun confiscation as well. She is extreme on abortion. She believes in late-term extreme dismemberment abortion. She would believe in abortions up till the time of birth. She's never seen a tax increase that she hasn't liked. So she certainly is just very extreme. She tries to paint herself as a moderate and independent, but her voting record, her views are extreme. And to your question about Republicans becoming Democrats in Kansas, there's 50 of them. And she found all 50 of them, and they were never Republicans. They were always liberals, but the only way they could get elected was to pretend to be Republicans. You've heard the term of rhinos. These folks weren't even rhinos. They were always Democrats. They were wolves in sheep's clothing. But we're going to win this thing. We lost a governor's race 2 years ago. All across the state, Kansas is waking up. We just finished a 2,000-mile, 28-stop bus trip from Colorado to Missouri. I've never seen people so fired up. Joe Biden couldn't get somebody to walk across the street to talk to him, let alone go vote for him. We are seeing thousands of Trump signs across the state. We are seeing thousands of Roger Marshall signs. I saw 2 Joe Biden signs in the last 8 days. I've seen 3 Barbara Bollier signs. America is waking up. We're going to talk with our vote. We need folks to get out there and vote. Early voting is open everywhere. That's all we got to do, people. You'll let your voice be heard. This is the time.
Okay, thanks. Could you also speak to a little bit on what you believe is happening in the presidential race? Obviously, the last debate, I I think Google search showed up that a lot of people said, how can I change my vote? I noticed that recently, I think last night in kind of my observation. But I think a lot of people saw kind of unfiltered where the president stands versus Joe Biden on issues, especially as it relates to energy. And I understand it. Kansas probably does have quite a bit of a energy industry. Do you think Biden admitting that he supports, I mean, throughout the campaign season, he has admitted to supporting some semblance of the Green New Deal, has flip-flopped on natural gas and fracking. Do you think his comments on phasing out the oil industry hurt him, especially in your state and nationwide? Is that kind of a turning point as there are these late deciders?
President Trump smoked him on the debate, right? He absolutely smoked him. Look, I'm not sure what's going on with Joe Biden as a position. I'm certainly concerned about his, he needs to have some type of a mental acuity test done. I think that if we want to know what a president's heart, how their heart's working, we'd also like to know how their brains are working. I think that Americans deserve that. But Joe Biden has promised to raise your taxes. He's promised to get rid of the Trump tax cuts. Joe Biden's Green New Deal, which him and his party support, would be the end of Kansas agriculture, the end of the Kansas oil and gas industry. It would triple your taxes. It's going to triple the prices of gas at the pump and double your electricity bill. He would kill middle America. He would kill our economy. Joe Biden is bad for America. And that's one more reason we have to keep the Senate majority, for the exact same reasons that, look, it is day and night. I hope that America can see through all the advertisements and see this is a very clear choice. President Trump has built the greatest economy of our lifetime. I'm very proud of what we've done working together. We've built a strong military. Our borders are more secure. We've taken care of our veterans. And the tax cuts has meant $2,000 more for the average American family. So let's keep America great. Let's keep it growing.
Do you have anything else you want to add for our conversation before I ask you to send people to follow you or connect with you?
So thanks for having me on. These are issues that are near and dear to my heart. Invite your listeners to come to Kansas and visit at some time. We got some incredible hunting and fishing here, wildlife viewing. It's one of the great gems of the world. It's my home. I've lived here all my life, except for those years in residency in the Army Reserve. So it's home to me. I want to keep Kansas great. I'm going to be running to make sure we keep families safe, healthy, and secure. I'm running to bring jobs back to Kansas. I'm running to protect our values like protecting our God-given constitutional rights, freedoms of religion, freedom of speech, our Second Amendment, and the sanctity of life. I'm running to make sure that we have a strong military. My dad, the police officer, make sure we have a strong police and law enforcement and secure borders. Thank you for all your listeners. Let's keep America great together. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dr. Marshall. And where could people follow your campaign in these dwindling days of the campaign season?
Oh, great. Just go to kansasformarshall.com, kansasformarshall.com, and you could search our Facebook, Dr. Roger Marshall as well. So thanks for having us.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for speaking with me, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.